the Michael Duke. Today's guest is Adam Broda. Our goal here at High Performance is to bring interesting guests who are thought leaders in their respective field, and have conversations so we can learn more about our leadership journey and how we can better ourselves. So, Adam, welcome this morning. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, so I'm in Shelbyville, Kentucky. It's nice, 40 degrees, sunshiny day here. Uh, Adam is in Seattle, Washington. What's the temperature like in Seattle this morning?
It's something I try not to look at on a daily basis, but I'm guessing it's somewhere around 45.
Well, it's not bad. That's
Yeah,
bad.
it's not
Well,
terrible.
so let's start us off this way. I've looked at your LinkedIn profile. Very interesting journey. So, the listeners, just give us a few minutes on your journey and kind of how you ended up where you are today as a coach.
Yeah, great question. I think I'll kind of start by saying I've always had a passion for working with people, even since the time when I was in high school. That's probably where it started. I was working a lot with younger kids at our church and through different community groups, and even coaching as a high school student. Sports teams at a lower level, and just again, it just kind of became a natural skill set. But yeah, as I went through college and got into different professional jobs and things of that nature, I began asking the question probably sometime in 2019 about how do I do more coaching. Um, I think the pandemic actually has kind of forced the function.
Hmm.
So I was telling Michael before we jumped on the live that yeah, in November 2019, my world kind of changed very abruptly. I had been with the Boeing company for 8 years, had kind of progressed up the rungs, and I was a senior production engineering manager in a brand new business unit called Boeing Additive Manufacturing. So we're doing 3D printing stuff, and yeah, life was good except for this really long commute that I had. And in November, I went out on maternity leave or paternity leave for 3 months because my wife had our first baby. And in that 3 month window between November of 2019 and February of 2020, the world just flipped upside down and landed on its head. And Boeing, of course, we already had a plane grounded, but pandemics don't really spell good things for aerospace. And when no one's flying, no one's buying. And of course, when no one's buying, that means typically headcount reduction. So while I was sitting in my house, watching the news, thinking, well, this doesn't look good, I began the process of what I would just call exploring. Didn't necessarily mean I wanted another job, but thought it might not be a bad idea to start looking for an option two or three. And it was around that time that I decided to launch a coaching startup called Broda Coaching. And it's a super simple, very low profile coaching business. We only work with one or two people at a time. We're very quality over quantity oriented. Every package we build is customized to the client, and we started that concept in February 2020. And right around the same time, I began having some networking conversations with past Boeing managers and people that I knew, and yeah, ended up getting an opportunity to work at the Amazon company in an equally new business called wellness technology, and it's actually what I do now in a slightly different capacity. But yeah, moved from production engineering over to tech, and I manage software engineers now, product managers, program managers, and we get the opportunity to build tech products that help people live a better, more fulfilling life at the company. So yeah, a bit of an extreme career change, a bit of a strange year, but I mean, 2020 was strange for everybody, and I wouldn't necessarily say that I had planned that move, but I would say that at the time when I was at Boeing, again, I'd been there for a while. I was looking for a change. I didn't want to be the career niche additive manufacturing person, the guy that knows everything about 3D printing. I think for me, I wanted something a little bit broader, and the move to tech was almost exactly what I was looking for. Um, Getting to work more on the technical side with software people, with hardware people, still in the engineering space, but kind of expanding my comfort zone a little bit. And yeah, the move fit, and that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, it, I've been coaching and involved in executive recruiter for over 20 years now, and almost without fail, there's this thread, right? there's this thread in a person's mind and their mindset and their thinking. So when they realize kind of where they are, it's like, oh, I'm doing coaching now. It's not like I just went to the library and read a book on coaching, right? I mean, there's something that's always been there, some nascent thing that has emerged because of an opportunity. In your case, it was both a challenge and an opportunity, right? That to kind of allowed this business to emerge.
Absolutely. Like you said, I mean, I was just sitting at my house with all the free time in the world, aside from not getting any sleep, but just thinking like, what passions, what skills, what things am I motivated to do that I could turn into a side business or something that I would enjoy doing with my time. And coaching was one of the top things on the list right after, professional F1 driver, which that was a longer shot. but uh but yeah, sometimes the question and the way to connect those dots isn't all that complicated. I think you're right.
So Ty, because Boeing's huge company, great
Mhm.
reputation. I know they've had a little bit of struggles here lately, but you can't discount their history. But Ty, what you learned at Boeing and your development opportunities at Boeing, and what are some of the key things that you've brought forward that you're able to share with people now through your coaching?
Yeah, it's a very loaded question, but a good one. I'd break that down into a few things. I'd say Boeing is a great company, and some of this, I mean, I don't work there anymore, so I guess I can say whatever I want. I'd say that the culture in many cases is actually influenced by the fact that there are unions, right? So there are these alternative groups that hold the corporate leadership accountable. There's a professional union, and then there's a labor union, and there's checks and balances in the system. And I would say that Boeing takes a very structured and risk averse approach to putting people into leadership roles. It's not
Hmm.
something that is easily done. You go through a lot of training, a lot of development. I'd say in moving into the tech world and being a part of Amazon for the last 2 years, what management means there is very different, right? For you to be responsible for hiring and firing another person takes a heck of a lot of, let's just say, qualification and proof to get to that level at a company like Boeing. And again, it's because of the legality behind the circumstances, right? You can be sued, and what you say can be, you know, documented by a union lawyer, and there's just a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and all that is understood. I'd say what I walked away with from Boeing, after being a manager there for 7 years at different levels of the company, was that people were the most important thing that we built. That that it really didn't matter at the end of the day what the product we were working was on. And I worked on a lot of random stuff. I worked on robotic systems and automated solutions. I built buildings. I stood up production lines and printed products and designed tools. I did a lot of different jobs there. And what I learned over the course of like the 8 different management positions I had is that the people were the most important element, right?
Hmm.
That if you could find a way to get the right people in and create a culture that was self-sustaining, a lot of the work of management would do itself, right? That I was able, in some cases I was fortunate enough to be on really bad teams. And I didn't build those teams, I inherited them, right? I would remember one job in particular. I was put into a night shift manufacturing job with like 40 mechanics, and not that it was their fault, but they were just unhappy because their manager had changed like 6 times in the last 4 months. And I got to witness what that looked like firsthand, right? What does a bad culture actually look and feel like? And how does work get done when people are angry up and upset? And then conversely, I got to see amazing teams. I got to, participate with really, really high quality leaders at the executive level, and shadow and watch and learn and got to see what they do. And the takeaway for me was the people make it all happen, right? As the manager, you've got to set up the infrastructure so that people can love what they do. And then, really your job in most cases, especially as a lower level manager, is to just clear the roadblocks, right? Let your amazing
Mhm.
people do what they do best and get all the stuff out of their way so that there aren't, things that hold them up. And
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest takeaway that I left that company with, aside from the fact that, like, you know, there's a really interesting balance between technical skills and soft skills at the management level. That's another thing I think I would add to that list is Boeing has so many different types of positions you can hold. Engineering jobs, analyst jobs, maintenance and mechanic jobs, and the list kind of goes on and on. And I'd say that really depending on the type of job you wanted, whether you wanted to be a chief engineer, or you wanted to, run a new business startup inside the company, there was always such a unique blend of soft and hard skills that I could roll into a different field with a certain set of transferable skills and experiences without necessarily being qualified, right? And I saw that happen the opposite way too, right? People with sales and marketing backgrounds coming in to run engineering departments, and depending on the level and what their
Mhm.
background are, they did an amazing job. So I think, again, at the end of the day, you need to have the right balance of skills for the types of positions that you want. And, beyond that, it's all about leveraging the value you know how to create to prove that you can do the position. And yeah, that was a interesting lesson to learn. And I'd say I continue to learn that in different ways, especially in the
Yeah.
tech industry. So those two
Well,
things.
you've called to mind, if you were to ask me, like, what are one of the top three, four, five truths that I've learned over the years, and when I coach or mentor young professionals who are
Mm.
going through a difficult time because they've got a manager who is, in their mind, not capable or not dedicated, or whatever the case may be. When I look back in my professional life, I learned some of the most valuable lessons from bad bosses, right?
Yeah.
Because I learned what not to do. And I learned what it feels like to have a bad boss, somebody who's abrupt or abrasive or disrespectful or unappreciative, whatever the case may be. And as I stepped into leadership, I'm 62. My first leadership job was at 26. So,
Mm.
leadership is part of my DNA, but I've always remembered that and made sure, because I chose not to make other people feel that way. And I've had great bosses. Um, Probably, yeah, more good ones than bad ones. But I'll tell you, I may have learned more powerful lessons from the bad ones that stuck with me. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the some of the most impressionable memories that I will carry around with me for the rest of my life have been in the failures. Seeing somebody come in and really just decimate a culture that is working. Those are the things that'll stick with me forever, right? Like, this is what you don't do, because I saw it not work, and I remember what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that. You're absolutely right. Yeah, just as much in
Well,
the
let me run
failures.
something by you. Um, you know, um, our host, Nick, and the three of us are talking before. Kind of, I guess, I don't know, Nick, what your title, producer or whatever of our program here, um, and uh, and we're talking about talent, teams, and culture. And I've been doing this a long time. I backed into most of the stuff that I do, but nonetheless, I've kind of come up with this core idea that there's three things that make a successful hire. Let me just share it with you, and then you can kind of comment how it relates to your experience at Boeing and Amazon, as well as in your own company. Um, Number one, we got to have the right person. The right person, how do you define that? So they've got to be a good job fit, right? If it's an engineering role, and you mentioned kind of the engineering track and then more the soft skills track, but I'm sure at Boeing you've met some very highly analytical, detail oriented people, maybe even rigid and inflexible, that would not necessarily have great soft skills. Great head down engineering, but not great soft skills. So if you need a detailed job, there's a certain type of person. If you need the soft skills, there's people that are wired well to do that. So we do assessments. My recruiting company is called the New School Group, and we do assessments to try to figure that out. But the other thing, the other two things, is we need to make sure that they align with the culture or values of the team. So when I recruit for talent, I ask for permission to go in and meet at least two or three of the people that the new position is going to interface with on a daily basis. Because when we recruit, I want to envision that person getting along with
Mhm.
and having good chemistry with those people. And I'll often assess them also, so we can kind of see where their behavioral profiles align or misalign. But the last thing, and it's kind of what we're talking about here, this conversation of bad bosses, is it's got to be a good fit with the leader. Uh, when I think back about my most difficult times, before I became self-employed, was when I was miserable because of my relationship with my boss. And and we don't have a good chemistry with our direct supervisor, life's just not going to be good. And we've heard that quote 1,000 times, right? We don't quit jobs. People don't quit jobs. They quit their boss. So boss, job, culture, or team, right? Did does that line up well with what you experienced at Boeing, or just in your own personal experience? And how would it differ? Be curious as to what your take would be on that.
Yeah, I think I think that's a good question. I'd say yeah, it does align. I would I'll add how I view it a little bit differently at the end, but I would say that cultures when done right should transcend the people that set them up, right?
What do you mean? Tell me
Self-sustaining
more about
cultures.
that. When you say culture should transcend, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
meaning if you start let's say you start a new business unit inside of some company, and the leader's job is to define the vision and the mission and the strategy, the key performance indicators, the objectives, right, all the way down to what is every person on this team doing, and how does that statement of work align back to this common objective, right, or the vision that we are trying to attain. That's the business side of culture. The people side of culture is work flexibility, and how much fun is it to come to work, and what are the people conversations like, how open and authentic and transparent are we about failures and flaws, and blah 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 blah. Again, we can kind of talk about that forever and ever, but what I really mean is that when that leader that set that business unit up is ready to go, and that happens all the time in business, right? um, the culture doesn't die with them leaving. And and that's really what I mean, is that I think cultures, when created the right way with the right structure in place, should outlast the people that built them.
It
They should
should, but
be.
what if the leader's the only one driving that? What if
that's
it's
that's
possible,
exactly.
right?
I mean, that's exactly right. That's the right question to ask. Is that, if the leader's the only one driving it, then it's not a healthy culture. It's got to come from the bottom up, and that's the real secret of high performing, high octane cultures. Is it's the people pushing the right values and the right moralities and the right business practices. And yeah, the leaders got to create the bones, right? But the teams and the employees got to put the meat on them. And
Well,
um,
I love what we're talking about right here. So let's kind of go a little deeper, okay?
okay.
So you're going to coach, for the sake of our conversation, you're going to coach an incoming leader, or maybe you're leading that leader and he or she's been at it and doing good things, but obviously driving the culture of the team, division, department.
Mhm.
And you're going to help them drive it through the organization so that when they're gone, it would be sustainable. What are they going to, what, how would you coach that leader to make that happen? What are they going to have to do so that it's not dependent upon them, right? Because we've seen that happen. Somebody comes in and they do a great job, performance goes up, and then they leave, crash and burn, right? So, how do we sustain culture? Let's just stick with that part. How would you coach and direct somebody and creating a sustainable, positive, effective, productive culture?
Yeah, I mean, another good loaded question. I think if I'm coaching and we're sitting in office and we're having this conversation, for me, feedback mechanisms are probably the first place that I would start. You have to have a way to understand what's really going on. And of course, we can talk about feedback mechanisms like surveys, right? Employee satisfaction surveys and yada yada. Whether you do those once a year or twice a year, I mean that is an aspect of it, right? But I really mean, like, beyond that, What's your one-on-one cadence look like? What kind of skip level meetings are you creating? Are there cross talks? Are there, opportunities for people to have a voice at every level of the company? And that's really where I think the conversation on establishing strong culture begins. Um, Beyond that, once you've got let's say, the feedback mechanisms in place and people can conversate, now it's a question of what do you do with it, right? How are you actioning the feedback and the recommendations that are coming, and how are you taking all that input and strategizing how to make improvements? You're going to get a lot of suggestions, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're all the best for your business. That's really where your leadership value comes in, is you're interpreting the feedback that comes through your funnel and then deciding on what's the best way to make impactful changes and how to, steer the ship in the right direction. I think phase two is essentially defining what's tolerable, right? And that's a lot of times where it gets really hard as a leader, is you have to set the example and then push to the next level down, whether that's employees or another set of managers, to hold the line. And I would say that storming and forming section is, like I said, is where the leadership teams really earn their salary, right? That defining what is an acceptable practice and what isn't is hard. And in big companies, and I've been there, right? In big companies, there are always going to be people pushing back against change, right? Sometimes just because it's different, and it'll take a little while for them to get used to new stuff. Other times it's just because people are not the best fit for this new culture you're trying to create, right? And
Mm.
that's the hard part of the job, is that you might have to do a little bit of storming and forming, and that might mean people leave, or the organization reshapes. But to get where you want to go culturally, a lot of times that has to happen, because if you have people undermining the culture, it's never going to be that bottoms up system that we talked about, right? It's never going to be, you know, the people driving the bus. It's always going to be the leader, shouting down and saying, "Hey, this is what we should do." And of course, everyone else is saying, "Yeah, well, you don't really understand what it's like to be us. So we're kind of just going to smile and nod. And when you're gone, everything will be different." So, yeah, I'd say phase two is typically the hardest part, and then phase three is sustaining. Again, once you got the right programs and feedback mechanisms in place, and you're making the changes, and you see the ship starting to turn, it's a question of how do you sustain, and that's where a little bit of what we talked about already, right? How do you create programs that allow the culture to be facilitated from the ground up, right? How can you start removing yourself from the process so that it's not you driving and mandating and being seen for all these cultural things, whether that's, again, the one-on-ones or the cross talks or the, happy hours or whatever it is. It can't come from that one individual, right? It's got to start being
Mhm.
bought into by the rest of the organization. And another, again, another thing that's much easier to say than do. But that's at least at a high level how I would start to
Yeah.
approach the process.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Let me add a little to that. So,
Hmm.
in coaching executives, oftentimes I see gaps, right? Where they'll say they believe one thing, that one thing is important, but then I see their behavior, um, you know, being in conflict with their values.
Hmm.
So what I've challenged leaders to do in different leadership programs that I have is number one is we talk about values a lot. So values kind of based leadership. So I used to just do brief little. I put maybe 2 3 dozen words like kindness, respect, love. Um, I don't know. Different things that would represent values and ask them to pick the ones that resonate most with them. Now I have a full app where they can go through and discover their core values. But think about that. So if we don't know who we are, right? If we don't really have our foundation, which we all have values, but some of us just don't know what they are. But if we take time to do the inside work to understand what our values are, then we can start thinking about what those values look like actualized in action. If I'm a leader and I say to my staff, for instance, respect, if I'm a person of respect, that's going to mean something to them, right? Because hey, I want you to respect your customers. I want you to respect each other. I want you to respect me. And they see me behaving that way. That's powerful, right? That sends a message that they get it, right? Because I think our employees, our team members, are looking at us as leaders and asking the question. I get he says respect, but what does respect look like? Because we've worked at places where what they say and what they do are not the same thing. And
Yeah.
then you ask the question, well, who gets promoted? Do the people that are the most politically adept get promoted? The people that are the highest performers get promoted, or the people that are most tightly aligned with their company values, are they the ones that get promoted? A quick story that I learned years ago. So, one of the things that really formed me in my early years, probably about when I was your age, is I became a general manager of Auto Trader magazine site in Kansas
Hmm.
City. I ran the Auto Trader magazine office in Kansas City. Then I went to West Michigan, and each of those, a startup in Kansas City, a turnaround in Michigan, and then we bought a competitor bigger than us, privately owned competitor bigger than us in South Florida. And I was the Palm Beach County manager. But here's the story. There's 85 offices, 85 separate auto trade, and they would send results out every month, right? And the Atlanta office was one of the top performers, making money, just all kinds of money for Auto Trader magazine. And then word got out that the GM in Atlanta was terminated. It's like, how do you terminate one of your best, most profitable managers? Well, as we come to find out, he was disrespectful. He'd get angry. He'd use profanity in front of other employees, directed at his employees. And the corporate sent some HR people in. The boss, his regional VP went in and coached him, right? Hey, it's not acceptable. This is not acceptable behavior. This is not respect embodied. This is not, how you model this value. And to Auto Trader's credit, he did it again a few weeks later, and they said, "You're good, but you're not that good."
Hmm.
So I've basically been teaching for years that strong culture companies hire more quickly when people violate values than performance standards. And when we send that message, boy, I think people they either it resonates and they gravitate to the culture, or it moves them out. Says, wow, I'm kind of a performance guy, and if they don't value my performance, I'm going to go find a company that does. But those of us that really shared the values, we were like, that's pretty cool. It's not
Yeah.
just words, right? It's they actually mean it.
Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd hope that you'd have people that are both. That would be my first thought, right? Is, man, I hope I could find some performers that also understand the values that we're trying to accomplish. But no, you're absolutely right. I think I can validate what you're saying firsthand, that I've seen, maybe less ethnically or ethically inclined performers move out when, a culture that's really doubling down on values and people first metrics maybe starts to take over, right? Because they know that's not their strong suit, and they probably can, again, do better somewhere else that doesn't necessarily care as much as about that. But yeah, it
Yeah.
does happen.
So we've got a few minutes left. We talked about your Boeing, and I read part of the article you wrote that you have on your LinkedIn. It's just really cool, the 3D printing and all that. Pretty cool stuff. And then you went into. You're still with Amazon now, or you left?
Yeah.
You're still with Amazon now. Tell us kind of the value proposition in your coaching work. What's in your wheelhouse? What is it you feel like that you can really bring to make a difference with the people that you coach?
Yeah, and you mean as at in the career Broda coaching
Broda
field, not at
Coaching.
work.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Uh, yeah, that's a great question. What's our value prop? I'll be the first person to tell you that I honestly think about that. I muted myself, sorry. Uh, sat on my button. Yeah, I'll be the first person to say that I don't 100% know. I think the value prop of Broda coaching is evolving. That what we wanted to do 2 years ago when we started has changed a little bit as we've grown, right? I think our value prop is more about coaching from the perspective of a hiring manager, um, than it was 2 years ago, where we were trying to just cover more student type coaching and intern type coaching and trying to help people break into their first job. And, things change. And again, I think, your client base changes and you learn what you're good at and you're bad at. And I think where we're really good, and this is to answer your question directly, where we're really good is with the mid level professionals to the more experienced executive level professionals, where a lot of our materials are relevant to people that have been in professional industries for more than 3 to 5 years, that they've already done that first job. And now it's a question of, hey, like, I've been working for a little bit and I know that I'm really good at these things, but I feel like the current job I have is not the fit, right? Like
Okay.
I want to pivot, but I don't know where to pivot to, or I want to get into tech or engineering, I'm not sure how. And in terms of what we do really well for that market, again, it's taking our coaching materials and spinning all of it from a perspective of the hiring team. So we teach you exactly how a hiring manager thinks so that you can market and sell and position yourself effectively to stand out in a crowd, to interview well, to communicate well, to do all the things. Again, it's not that we're manipulating the system. It's simply that, again, hiring manager is going to write a job description, but at a big tech company like Facebook or Google or Microsoft, and they're going to hand that to a sourcing team, and they're not going to look at it probably ever again. A sourcer is going to go out and find, 40 to 60 candidates, put those resumes into PDF and send that back to the hiring manager and say, can you give me like 5 to 10 people that you really like? And that's who we'll start phone screens with, right? As the hiring manager, I'm looking through 40 to 60 PDFs in an hour, right? And you as the job seeker, when you know that, and you know that I've got an hour to go through 60 people, that's a minute to 2 minutes tops on one resume. How does that affect how you write the resume,
Yeah.
right? How does that affect how you say something on a phone screen? So that's how we coach. We try to put you into the shoes of the people making the hiring decisions so that you can, one, relate with them as they're going through the process, but two, be better prepared for how to market yourself and sell the value added aspects that you have to offer. So I'd say that's our value prop at this point, and it can be more detailed than that, but I think it's a good high level.
Yeah, yeah. So I appreciate that. It's interesting. I don't write resumes. I'm an executive recruiter.
Mhm.
I love to work with business owners. So really, most of my clients, 90% of my clients, have fewer than 100 employees because I like working with the owner. I like being like their adjunct recruiter. I tell them I want to be the recruiter down the hall, that you come to me and you say, oh, we need another salesperson, or we need a leader of this department, and we know their culture so intimately that we're able to go out as if we work for that team, right? We know the players, we know
Mhm.
whether they'll fit, whether they fit or not, because resumes, without being dishonest, can can be what's deceiving's not the right word. There's a lady here in town that I send all my business to. People will call me and they'll say, "Do you write resumes?" And I say, "No, I don't." I mean, she charges five, six, seven, eight, $900 to interview the people thoroughly and write their resume. It's totally honest, but when
Yeah.
she's done, and you look like a rock star. And so it's important for a hiring manager, in my opinion, to really know how to read between the lines on these resumes, right?
Yes.
Because job titles don't mean that much.
Yes.
There's so many things. That's a whole nother conversation about resumes and
Oh,
all
you're
that.
spot on. You're spot
Yeah,
on. I've learned a lot about hiring myself from the coaching that I've done. So you're exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah.
The where I think we intersect, is, I'm helping people. Um, Probably most of my business, if I think about my revenue stream, is recruiting. So we're a contract recruiter. Um, I'm in the Louisville, Kentucky area, and I love the fact that most of my business is in this market. The other thing that I'm able to do, and I think is the virtue of just being more seasoned and having a lot of different experiences. I'm a Vistage chair. Are you familiar with Vistage?
No.
So Vistage is a international company. I am a facilitator with 12 members, all different business owners or CEOs, and I'm learning from their experiences, and then they learn in to help each other. So it's like being in a lab. You talk about being in a lab,
Mm.
where every month we're debating and discussing different challenges with each other, and they're all leaning in for one another's benefit to help solve problems. So I commend you in what you're doing. The experience you got at Boeing is so rare. So few people at your age get 7 years with a company like Boeing. And Boeing doesn't have to be perfect to give you lessons and life skills and leadership skills that now you're able to share with your clients. And Amazon, right? Again, a great company. They don't have to be perfect, to help you in a totally different way, with different culture, different leadership aspect,
Yeah.
so that you can share another aspect with your clients and how they can be better and move up within the ranks. So I'm going to kind of hand it off to you, let you wrap up on your end, whatever you'd like to share with the people that are listening to the podcast. I'll say a couple words at the end, and we'll call it a day. Okay.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for the opportunity to come on and discuss. I think it's always great to meet other people in the same industry and just share experiences and insights. I think the coolest part about coaching and being, a quote unquote influencer on LinkedIn, which I just hate that term, but whatever, um, is getting to talk to so many people like this in these settings. And again, learning from somebody that's, got 20, 30 years doing similar work and meeting people and talking leadership. And I just love the idea swapping that goes on. And I think maybe that's even how I would close is, for people that are out there listening to these kinds of calls and trying to glean some insights from people like us, I would say keep listening, keep asking questions, keep making connections, keep talking. There's so many people out there that are willing to help if you approach in the right way. And, that's one of the coolest parts about LinkedIn as a platform. And then all the coaching services that are out there is a lot you can pick up for relatively no cost, and continue learning and improving yourself. I'd say, yeah, quick plug. If you're interested in career coaching transitions and you want to get into tech or engineering and you're just struggling with how to do that, give us a call, right? Check out my LinkedIn page. We got a website, brodacoaching.com, and send us an email. And yeah, we do free 15-minute consultations. We'll talk to you. We'll answer your questions. You don't have to pay for coaching services to do that. We're willing to talk to anybody in a short amount of time. And yeah, maybe there's a way we can help you get into the job that we'll hopefully give you the lifestyle that you want to have. So that's it for me. Again, thanks,
Yeah.
Michael, for having me.
Oh, Adam, it's been a pleasure. When I reflect on our conversation, I think it is cool for listeners to see. So, in your story, right, you talked about coaching kids, right, that were younger than you. Talked about church and mentoring people at church. You talked about having this mindset of giving back, having this mindset of helping others. And there may be people, just somebody listening to our conversation who's saying, there's something better out there for me. There's something, and yet I don't know what it is. Well, you might want to look back at like your thread, because it was similar for me. We didn't talk about this, but I was always active in church. I was a minister in my young 20s. And the idea of making people better, teaching, training, biblical training, more one-on-one kind of mentoring, and,
Yeah.
kind of this spiritual maturity thing. But that was my heart. That's who I wanted to be. And it seems like that thread is carried forward with me, that wherever I've been, I've tried to make people better. I'm sure I wasn't always as effective as I would have liked to have been, but the coaching work I do today, the coaching mindset kind of online program that I have, it's all about that. In
Mm,
my opinion, if you're a leader and your number one priority is not making the people on your team better, you've got the wrong priority. You've
yeah.
got the wrong priority. It's not about making money. It's not about making your company money, because if you make your people better, the results will come, right? The results will come. So thank you, Adam. Wish you well. Everyone, you learned how to reach Adam, Broda Coaching. And thank you for tuning in to High Performance with us today. We appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.